Well, hello there. I was just thinking, you can measure your system uptime to like 6 decimal places. You can track progress variability to Six Sigma standards, and you know exactly when a machine is about to fail. But we have no idea when an employee's state of mind has been declining, or when their risk of a serious accident or mental health episode has just doubled. We're flying blind on the thing that matters most. Today's guest is John Moore, and he's going to tell us something a little bit uncomfortable, which is that every metric we're tracking, whether it's turnover, burnout, engagement scores, they're all lagging indicators. We're measuring the wreckage after the crash, and the reason that we don't see it coming is that we're treating state of mind like it's unmeasurable, when it's actually the most predictive risk factor that we're ignoring. What makes this worse is that our enterprise culture doesn't matter nearly as much as we think it does. What matters is microculture, the specific dynamic between a boss and their team, which means your one-size-fits-all HR programs are solving the wrong problems for most of your organization. Today we're going to cover why state of mind should be treated with the same urgency as system outages, how to get real-time leading indicators instead of quarterly lagging ones, why microculture trumps enterprise culture and what that means for your programs, and where AI can personalize support at the team level, not just the individual level. I'm David Rice. This is People Managing People. And if the last 5 years have pulled back the curtain on a massive blind spot in your organization, this conversation is going to show you exactly what to do about it. So let's get into it. John, welcome to the show.
David, great to be here.
As you and I were chatting before this, we were talking about this idea of state of mind and it being sort of like an overlooked risk factor for the workplace today. And I want to start kind of big picture there because I think HR traditionally looks at, or people operations, it would tend to look at lagging indicators, things like turnover, productivity, engagement, but those often reflect the outcome of like poor mental or emotional states, not the cause. So, I'm curious because we design policy and process around behavior, but we're sort of ignoring the psychological conditions that drive that behavior. And when we think about things like burnout, quiet quitting, cognitive overload, all these things are kind of on the rise right now.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, shouldn't state of mind be treated with the same urgency as like system outages or compliance risks? So I'm curious, can you define state of mind as a risk factor for us? And like, what does it mean to operationalize that in a people strategy?
Yeah. So there are actually clinical tools to measure these things. And the psychology profession is really good at doing it. The challenge with them is that these types of instruments are administered. They're hard to do. They're administered by professionals and they're time consuming and require professional judgment. So, but there are ways of doing a proxy, like just asking people, how do you feel? And the really important thing about that is that, as we found out through our research, not every day is a good day. Not every minute is a good minute. That we all, as human beings, cycle through a constant ebb and flow of energy level of our overall state of mind. And when you look a little bit more into that, what you realize is it's a key determinant of productivity, of employee engagement, of interpersonal behavior in a team setting, which can drive psychological safety in the workplace. It can also drive physical safety. So a person who's distracted because something is going on at work, they've broken up with their partner, the kids are sick, they've got something going on in their life, can affect in a fairly significant way the attentiveness that they're spending on task, which changes the risk profile of safety in the workplace. So all those things are important. One of the other things that you called out, David, is the impact on burnout. So there is a direct connectivity. If you're spending too much time in a poor state of mind, your risk of developing a clinical illness increases as well. So we're quite passionate that employers should be figuring out ways. My company actually has a really simple way delivered through an app to actually measure this and monitor it in real time and provide the data back in an anonymous fashion to provide a leading indicator of where things are going. So the idea here is if you see for a particular work unit a negative trend over a period of time of the employee mind of the the state of mind of the employee group, that you should take action. Because if you're in a construction company and the state of mind is declining down, your risk of having an accident at that site is increasing. So as a leader, you should be paying attention to it. A huge problem in this entire space of employee wellness, or employee surveying for that matter, is the data is either not collected at all, or it's collected very infrequently. And so to improve state of mind and to capitalize on some of the benefits to an organization of having a strong state of mind employee cohort requires that you have to have the data to manage it. And most organizations, virtually all organizations that we talk to, don't have this data. So you're really stuck with lagging indicators that you called out. People can tell you how many people are off on burnout leave, short, long-term disability, how many accidents they've had, but very little in the way of proactive leading indicators that allow an organization to actually drive an improvement agenda.
I'm curious, in your research, have you seen, maybe certain demographics where state of mind is a bit more of a risk, like are young people, or maybe it's frontline workers, something like that? Like, I don't know, has there been any breakdown of that for who's at risk?
It's really interesting. Every group, we talk to organizations around the world, David, in all industry verticals: agriculture, transportation, healthcare, retail, financial services, government, policing, North America, Australia, Europe, India, and demographic cohorts, like everything that you can imagine: sexual orientation, gender identification, male, female, old, young, educated, not. I'll tell you, we have a ubiquitous problem. This idea of mental health, or being mentally fit, or having a strong state of mind, is a universal issue. I don't see in our work a dominant pattern that say you have to worry about young people, or you have to worry about a specific ethnic cohort, subcohort. Um, to me, I can't prove this, but anecdotally through conversations, I think what happens is people live within their context of who they are, and within who they are, you're still subject to the cycles of dynamically flowing through your state of mind. It's part of the human experience, whoever you happen to be. So I believe, and I think we're on the early days of doing research about this. This is truly a population-wide issue. And yeah, I mean, there might be little ticks up and down across subcomponents of a demography, but everybody's impacted by this, as far as we can tell, and our data would kind of support that.
That's interesting, because I mean, that expands out to then when we think about the organization, right? We think about different levels of the organization. And, we were talking before this, we were talking about how AI can sort of personalize support, not just for individuals, but for microcultures sort of inside the organization.
Yeah.
What does that mean for leadership, and like, what does that actually look like in practice?
So that's a great question. Well, we went into our research believing that culture, as measured by engagement or new emerging standards around psychological safety in the workplace, we went into this thinking that that really mattered. So if you take a very resilient, thriving individual who's got a great state of mind, but you put them in a toxic workplace, you're going to suck the life out of the battery of the resilient person. So what we talk about a lot is, how do you get leadership to work both sides of the battery? In other words, invest in equipping your population, your group, with strong resilience skills so they can bounce back when junk happens in their life at home or at work. But equally to work on the culture piece, so that you support the state of mind of your individuals to the best of your ability. So as I was saying, we came into it thinking that culture really mattered, and our research actually concluded that culture doesn't matter. It really doesn't. What really matters is the microculture. So the microculture, mathematically or statistically, what we see is, as you drill down into an organization, the variation in what matters within the work units as you drill down changes fairly dramatically. And it's really driven by the interplay between the boss and the group of individuals that comprise the team. So that's what I refer to as the microculture. So it's not some amorphous thing that is the enterprise culture. What really matters is down at the work unit level. How am I interacting with my boss? How am I interacting with my colleagues? So here's the challenge organizationally, and certainly in my corporate experience, I was a longtime executive with some of the larger companies in the world, two of the larger companies in the world, and we did engagement surveys on an annual basis, and we would look for themes that we could drive a consistent corporate program right across our enterprise. Certainly within our country or within our line of business. The challenge with that, when you do that, is as you drop down in the organization, if you drive a program on improving communications or anti-harassment training, because that's a theme that bubbles up in the enterprise level, you may actually not be addressing, you may very well be not addressing at all the issue at the micro level. So the issue at the micro level might be about communications, but you may enterprise-wide be driving an anti-harassment program because at the top level, that's what it's saying. So the risk to the enterprise is there's several. Number one is you're not addressing the real problem at the work unit level. So when you start to build it up, you're not going to see an improvement at the top because you're missing the rich interaction at the work unit level. The other thing that you risk coming across as a leadership team as tone deaf. So if you're actually at the work unit level and you see things very differently, but you see a communication issue, for example, within your team, but you're getting training on anti-bullying, you may go, what the heck are they doing? They're not paying attention to the survey result I gave when I was asked about my opinion. We actually think this is a huge problem with the way enterprises survey right now. Is there and the activation around it is too much top down. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do top down. What I'm saying is you should absolutely add bottom up, empowering leaders at the microcultural level and equipping them to deal with the specific issues in that work unit. That's the way to drive improvement at the top level in a really important and significant way.
This idea of sort of personalizing by microculture, it sounds really powerful, and I think it's interesting because it sort of challenges the way we've always thought about culture, right? Which is like this giant shared experience, even though I think we all kind of know like that's not really the reality of it. But I'm curious, is there any risk of like micro fragmentation? Like, I guess, do you have like an example of how might an AI system sort of recognize and adapt support for the unique state of mind in, say, I don't know, a customer support team versus an engineering person?
So first of all, I don't think you can do it unless you have AI, like to really to there's a computing power and if you wanted to do this on spreadsheets or on heat maps or something like that, you get pretty quickly overwhelmed. So the power of AI to me is if you can drive data, which we've actually done, drive data into an AI learning model, you can actually bring in a whole series of characteristics, not only of the individual, so their specific unique demographic profile, but also about the organizational context, aka the microculture situation that they face. And you can also bring in things like the functional area, so difference between a call center operation versus somebody in a retail setting versus warehousing, distribution, transportation. So those are all different functions that you might find in an organization. You can actually bring in the unique characteristics of the people that those functions attract into the model as a way of driving personalized interventions, not only for the actual to the worker, but to the leader as a leader and leader as a human being, because they are human beings too, but also to help guide a leader into what they should be doing within the context of that work unit, given the profile of the individuals that are on the team. So we're busy developing an AI proof of concept. We've actually built it, and we're just testing it right now. But it shows fantastic promise, like really amazing capability to drive deep personalization right to the employee level, which of course offers the opportunity to have bigger impact.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, part of this is like scale, right? Like, 'cause I think that's so HR is under pressure to do more with less, like a lot of other people, and scale becomes sort of this default metric of success. How well can you scale something that resonates and increase impact? And when we think about culture in particular, it's difficult because you can add noise pretty easily. I'm curious, when we think about this difference between scale and relevance, right? If, let's say, AI is helping me scale sort of these generic culture programs faster, I'm not sure I'm actually solving anything, right? I'm just sort of automating a disconnect
Yeah.
that exists.
Yeah. I love the way you put it. And I think it's a great observation. I think it's correct. So the vast majority of organizations that we talk to, and I live this myself as a former operator, or leader of businesses, is we use this process called an annual employee survey. Now, there's other things coming up now that are continuous listening and a variety of other great products in the market that amp up the flow of data. But the traditional doing an annual employee survey, in my mind, is broken. It doesn't work. And it's not because we want to be bad leaders when we get the result. It's that we have so many things coming at us in real time, sources of data that are coming at us, that it's only human nature that you're going to pay attention to what's in your face every day. Okay. So if I'm running my background is in the consulting industry. If I'm running a consulting shop, I get forecast to close on my sales pipeline for the month, for the quarter. I get my staff utilization rates. I get quality indicators. It's all coming on real time. It's on my cell phone. So that's what I'm going to pay attention to. I don't get my employee survey data for, arguably, in the consulting industry. It's the most important asset you got, is, other than your brand, is the human capital that are working for you. I get virtually none of this data that we're talking about in real time. So in order to change behavior, actually improve culture, you need to have the data coming way faster, and you have to put it in the hands of the microculture leaders and actually to make a difference. So I'm actually kind of fond of saying, what part of your business you run on annual data these days? And the answer is, well, I don't run none. And yet most organizations run their human capital programs based on lagging indicator, very infrequent, insufficient data. So the only thing you're really left with in a program like that is to do, point in time. I'll do it top down, and we'll drive this program, because you got to do something. You have to show to people that there's something coming out of the survey and all the effort that we put into it. But truly speaking, the vast majority of people that I talk to, privately at least, will admit that the process is broken, doesn't work, creates cynical employees in a lot of cases. Very, very difficult to get response rates up. So that, the natural thing to do that is shorten the survey, because it's faster. That'll drive up our response rates. But fundamentally, we believe that the whole thing has to be blown up, and let's start from scratch and rethink how we do this. And then when you do that, if you do a continuous surveying approach, and you get the data coming in, then you've got a really cool basis for applying AI technology to it. Take your organization culture and employee state of mind to a different place.
Yeah, I think the big potential, at least based on, my observation, is sort of making you aware of things because I think the continuous piece is the important thing you just said. Like, how do you become aware of things that you never would have been aware of before? Because, like you said, they wouldn't, to give you the depth of response at enough scale to sort of like understand it on an org-wide level. I think like maybe this can help us break out of that.
It needs to happen. I mean, here's the reality is, there are too many workplace culture, microcultures. There are way too many people getting sick by going to work. We have to do something about this. If you look at policing in North America, the data will suggest 1 in 5 service members are off work on any given day because of the demands of a really tough business called policing. A whole bunch of that is caused by psychological stressors that happen in the workplace that can be impacted. Interpersonal behaviors, not only within the team itself, but in interactions with the public. So that there are things that can be impacted, but you're never going to change behavior if you only measure once a year. It's actually amazing to think about the amount of money that's spent in this day and age around employee measurement. Really, is just not going to work. But the problem is there for sure. We have, as I said, way since COVID, I think this has really come into clear focus for the world, that we have a really big problem here. We live in a very demanding, complicated world. The pace of change is accelerating. If anything, it's getting more confusing, harder to deal with. We've got to come up with innovative ways of cracking the code on it, because people are not very good at figuring this out. And that permeates our cultures, obviously, as well.
Absolutely. And you just, you're talking about since COVID, and when we think about psychology of the workplace, one of the things that comes up all the time is psychological safety. It's a term that's everywhere now, right? But I sometimes feel like it's a little bit misunderstood. And now you've built a data set that's like one of the largest data sets on psychological safety. So I'm curious, can you tell us a bit more about that and what's sort of a myth that it busts about what employees really need?
Yeah. So let me start, David, with a bit of a discussion of what is psychological safety. So there are actual national standards for psychological safety in many countries around the world. So Europe has an ISO standard that's been developed. Australia has a standard, actually has sub-standards within different states within Australia. The US has proposed legislation called the Workplace Safety Act, WPSA, I believe is the acronym. Canada has a standard. The Canadian Standard Association's published a standard. So these are finding their way. These standards define, in effect, a variety of things that contribute organizationally to an employee's state of mind, when you actually, just to simplify it. So it's not employee engagement as a metric. You think of it as a series of factors that contribute to whether an employee is engaged or not, but they're very actionable. They're very measurable, and they are finding their way into labor legislation around the world. So Australia is leading the charge on this and has actually obligated employers to create physically and psychologically safe workplaces. And the driver for this is a dramatic spike in the last decade in worker comp claims. So insurance companies sometimes are run by, in a lot of countries, are run by governments. In Australia, it's WorkSafe Australia. They're responsible for insuring employers on when there's accidents on site. And what they're noticing is mental health is an injury in and of itself, and the claims were skyrocketing. So countries are actually, Australia's way out there, they're actually inspecting employers right now, looking for evidence of continuous measurement of psychological safety risks and mitigations. So this is a real deal in Australia. I attended a webinar a few weeks ago by WorkSafe Australia. There were 14,000 people on the call. So a lot of countries are looking at this and paying close attention to it. And so I think it's a really big, very, very big concern. So your second part of your question was, so that's what it is. We built a data set we were able to get our hands on a very large open data set of employee surveys. We've been using that to research different aspects of what matters within a psychological safety construct. I think one of the things that we've found is that the correlation between psychological safety and engagement has been interesting. So it's very tightly correlated, as you might expect if you dug into it a little bit. But the measures, the factors in the psychological safety standards seem to us to be much more actionable. So you can hook a program onto specific interventions that can be taught. So training programs that move the needle on psychological safety factors that is easier to do than driving a program around this concept of employee engagement. So that's been a bit of an aha. And I think in the fullness of time, partially driven by legislation moving in different countries, partially driven by making things more actionable around this, we may find that the whole concept of engagement kind of fades a little bit. And what will emerge is this idea of psychological safety. I want to highlight, I think this is going to happen because, there may be listeners on this podcast that are based in the US or based in Germany, but have operations in Australia. If you do, and you haven't heard of this legislation, you should absolutely dial it up on the internet and find out what's going on, because their penalties are significant. If you have injury due to psychological safety factors that can be controlled in your workplace, you can actually get thrown in jail. It's the real deal. It's serious. So whether you actually work there or not, if you have accountability for, in some way, through HR or what have you, for operations in Australia, you should totally be aware of what's going on there.
What I find interesting about this is, a lot of leaders I think want to create safety, but they don't know how or measure the wrong
Yeah.
things when they try, right? So, I guess my follow-up question would be like, what are some of the early warning signs of unsafe environments and that often go unseen?
Well, that's a bit the challenge is it's just hard to measure. I mean, when you look at your engagement survey, in my experience, when there were areas, I have to be careful of this because I was a leader myself, so I may be if some of my former employees hear this, they may have some things to say about me. Yeah, yeah, I'm not very self-aware yet, but anyway, I think the process is just a little bit broken. I don't think I ever wanted to be a poor leader. It's just the data didn't, um, the what I do about it to improve, was never really obvious. And then getting the reinforcement, if I'm trying to tweak something about my leadership style, whether it's my communications or whether it's, um, you know, some other aspect that came out of a survey, I never got the reinforcement in real time to find out whether what I was doing is working. Matter of fact, this afternoon I'm doing a presentation to somebody, to a senior person who's been working on changing an engagement score for 2 years, and I have my hands on data that I'm going to show her. She's can't wait to see it because she has no idea whether what she's been doing has had any impact or not. So I think our process is broken. And behavior change requires constant reinforcement. Leaders require data. I mean, leadership's a complicated game. It's not easy. And if you don't have the feedback, it's really hard to actually make a difference. I'll call out one other thing, David. In a lot of organizations use 360 feedback as a key tool for leadership development. I've gone through the process myself twice in my career, a long career. You can tell by my hair. I've been around a long time, but I had it twice. So you get great feedback. You get a coaching session, maybe you get a couple of other things, but then it's done. So these are very specific point in time interventions that work for a short period of time, but then you move personally, you move career wise, you move, your team changes, your role changes. These all have an impact on leadership behaviors that have to be measured to give me feedback on whether what I'm doing is working with my group or not. So I'm really, I'm sure it's coming out through this conversations. I'm deeply passionate about the process that we use in leadership development, in team leader development, is just broken. It doesn't really suit it to what I needed as a leader to actually improve myself. And I wanted to, not that, like we don't go into this wanting to be crappy leaders. That's far from the case. I mean, arguably you're going to find your group of special individuals because we're all human beings. But I think generally most people want to do a better job, and you get promoted into a leadership role, you want to get better at it. We just don't give the feedback. So I think, this is all sort of wrapped into building a psychologically safe culture, in supporting our individuals to be the best that they can be, because we've got to change how we do this and really put a big focus on it. I'll call out one thing. It's not directly related to your question, but I'll call out one other thing that really strikes me in the last few years when I've been getting deeply into this through this company that we started. But when you listen to coaches in professional sports or high end athletics of any type, when you listen to coaches and when you listen to the athletes, there's a remarkable convergence of language that you hear them in interviews. They all talk about one game at a time. We're going to worry about one shift at a time. We're going to worry about the next play, the things that we can control. We're going to try and even out. We're not going to get too high. We're not going to get too low, among a host of other things. There is a reason that language happens. It's because coaches work really hard at creating cultures and creating behaviors in their team that focuses on these things, because that's what drives high performance. The best teams in the world have that common, not only what comes out of their mouth, but they actually live it on their team. They live it as, if you're a sprinter and you're out there by yourself, you live it as an athlete. So what we're talking about in many ways here is just taking what is alive and well in the athletic space and lifting and shifting it into the workplace and helping leaders get their heads around. You can drive significantly higher performance out of the human capital that you're paying for on your P&L by focusing on this stuff. We got to get really, really good at doing it. And arguably, certainly in my time as a leader, I could have done a lot better.
It's interesting because, we talk about the data and people teams, they want to be data driven, but oftentimes I think it feels like a mountain of noise, right? Like if you haven't got it or you've got it, but it's unstructured and there's not a good starting point. And I don't know how many conversations I've had over the last year about garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yep.
So I think HR has a little bit of a data problem. And it's
Yep.
either the right data isn't there, or there's too much data to make sense of, or it's really sloppy, and they don't feel like they're going to get value from it. How are people leaders supposed to build sort of like an AI-driven model without a fuel source is sort of my question.
That's a big challenge. I think I talked a little bit earlier that I'm not sure there's a good starting point
Mm,
in HR. Like I think it
yeah.
is really requires a fundamental rethink, like new tooling. One of the things one of my colleagues says a lot, the old toolkit just isn't working. I mean, we've got all these existing things that we've been doing, and yet the incidence of employee burnout is increasing. I saw a study out of the UK earlier this year, a survey of executives in policing across England, and it was an anonymous survey. Half of the executives that were interviewed would not be fit for duty in against the rules. That's a big issue. So think of that. You've got half leaders trying to lead police services. Half of them would not be fit for duty according to their own standard. And the stressed out leader is probably not a very good leader. So I think there's not an easy way of doing it. I think it's not about what we're talking about here is not about your HRIS, it's not your ERP solution. It's really about fundamentally rethinking some of these other things that we're chatting about. I'll put one other thing out there that we found on the data side that is anything to do with what we're talking about here. Data security and privacy is a radioactive issue. So what we found is that half the people had access to our solution didn't even download it because they were concerned about their data getting in the hands of the employer. And if you're in you're in an environment where fit for duty matters, you're an air traffic controller, you're a police officer, whatever, people are very skittish about making sure that the employer cannot see their data. So I think there's a whole rethink around this. If you're trying to collect data on these types of topics using your corporate systems, it's not going to work. You won't get responses, you won't get participation. Because your people just won't trust. So what we've moved to is a token-based technology that guarantees anonymity. So in our solution, people are really just a 12-digit code to ensure so that we can say to them directly and confidently, we do not know who you are. In the data security space, this is referred to as personally identifiable information, or PII for short. So having access to a person's, and what we're talking about here, knowing a person's name or email address just ain't going to cut it. You're not going to get the participation that you need to drive the change, to capitalize on the change opportunity. So you've got to move to, as part and parcel of rethinking this whole thing, to listeners on the call, I would strongly encourage you to really consider the impact of PII on what you're trying to do. You have to move to tooling that protects that. So you can't get it through your benefit provider because they have to know they're processing, dental claims and other health things. So they know who your employees are. They have to know who they are. So you're not going to get it through there. You're not going to get it through your ERP or HRIS systems because they know who you are too. So there's a just to call out another aspect that has to be dealt with here.
If we're looking at this, the for sort of first steps for leaders sort of get ready for this, because I'm not sure we can wait for like data perfection, right? And
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
we see the people analytics function, it's changing, and I think there's a lot of skills within that are going to lend itself well to HR leadership. We just did a podcast recently talking about this, but um, if a people leader has sort of zero analytics background, like what is the first thing they should be asking their data team for or be looking for sort of in their own data?
I think they should be asking for mental fitness IQ. Shameless commercial. I think certainly something real time, and I think something that can be personalized. At least it doesn't have to be driven by AI. I mean, you can crawl before you walk, before you run. I think we're going to see AI tooling coming in faster than, like, we're weeks away from actually putting into our enterprise solution capability around that. So I think that opens a whole pile of doors up and really makes things, holy Jesus, going to change fast. But, even without AI, there's a lot that can be done by just having real-time access to data in the hands of leaders. We actually provide dashboards to leaders through an app so that you can actually see in real time the results for your group. We do this all the time. If you're using a CRM tool of any kind, and you're in a sales or pipeline sales management role, you get real time data on Salesforce or HubSpot right pushed to your cell phone. So that's the type of thing that I think is coming and is essential, and I think should be top of the list. Like, there's just the research that would suggest, and this isn't my research, this is research done by McKinsey, by Gallup, by PwC, by Deloitte, that a 1% improvement in engagement has between 1 and 3% improvement in productivity. So depending on the role in the organization, there is huge dollars in payback ROI associated with even marginal improvements in the behaviors, microcultural behaviors that drive employee engagement. And the evidence is, there's a mountain of it. And again, I didn't make this up. This is, generally accepted. The real thing is, how do you tap into that? What do you have to do to change behaviors to drive an improvement in engagement? That's the hard part. Without the real-time data, without the data getting pushed to a leader's cell phone so they can actually see it, modify their behaviors, etc.
It's interesting stuff. I want to finish with this, because I think we've talked about personalization a little bit.
Yeah,
And one thing I find interesting about this is like the gap between uh, sort of expectation and actual workplace experience. It's growing, right? Like employees are used to like these Amazon level personalization, right? But that's
yeah.
often not what they're getting from HR programs. And so I'm curious, in this world of, hyper personalized consumer experiences, why do you think most HR interventions still sort of have this like one size fits all? And where do you think AI is going to make the biggest difference on this?
It's a great question. And I'm not sure, but I'll give you an opinion. I think it's hard to do. I think in the old ways of doing it that have just become routine and are part of employee measurement industry norms, they just sort of become ingrained, and it, um, you know, arguably it's easier to get real time data on the performance of a photocopier or an engine, or your uptime for your, like, you can measure uptime of your systems down to the Six Sigma. And that's the standard for process variability is this Six Sigma. That means you're looking at process variability to six digits, decimal places. I mean, it's remarkable how much effort and time and investment goes into measuring things in massive detail. I think when we're talking about human beings, it's just hard to do, and we haven't really figured out. I think what we've been talking about for the last half hour or so is really the future. It's what we have to do, unless AI is going to take the need for human beings to work right out of the equation altogether, which I don't see happening in my lifetime. And you're younger than I am. I don't think it's going to happen in yours. It'll
I'm
have an
not banking
impact.
on it.
Yeah, we're still we're still we're still going to have to deal with the fact that we have a really important, put it crassly, item on our P&L that's that we're paying for, that we got to find new ways of driving value out of it. And I'll go personal for a second. There's too many people getting sick at work. Workplace stress is a leading cause of mental illness. So we can't, societally, we have to do something about this. And actually, one of the things that we're also super passionate about, I mean, not surprisingly, when you think about it, the ability of employees to deal with the complexity of today's world and the workplace and in life in general is not very good. And it's not very good in part because we don't teach kids in our education system how to bounce back, how to be resilient. And, we could spend another half-hour podcast on, the resilience challenges associated with parenting styles and social media and all sorts of stuff. We won't go there. I've got 3 kids myself, and I've got a whole other set of conversation pieces around that. But, this applies to everybody. It's not just young people, as we were saying before. It's senior leaders as well. So I think we just gotta. It's a problem, and we were oblivious to it. Like in my role as an executive in 2 major corporations, we took great effort to make sure that we had the best EAP programs for our folks who were in trouble. We careful about watching for warning signs. We wrapped our arms around people to give them the best that we could to help them get better. This idea that employee state of mind, which is bouncing up and down all the time, it's the human experience. We all go through it. The impact that had on our business, we were oblivious to. We had no idea. Never really thought about it. COVID pulled the drapes back or the curtains back on that and exposed this. Holy geez, this is a huge problem. So I don't think we've got any choice but to, get on with dealing with it. I think it's kind of inevitable. And here's the great news is, AI offers I would view, some people look at AI as being the grand threat, and, who knows where that's going, but I'm in the positive psychology business, so I'm going to talk about the opportunity here. I do see massive opportunity to use AI tooling to actually help people build the skills and improve the cultures so that people don't get sick in the workplace. And even better, so that they can live happier lives, come to the workplace, feel good when they're in the workplace because they enjoy it. And when they do, they can contribute way more to the bottom line than if they're in a crappy mood. So it's all a closed system, obviously, but I think you can do really well by your people, really, really well, really help them out, invest in their abilities to be a better human being in the workplace, drive them to do the work required to develop these skills, and it applies right across the continuum of their lives. So I think you can feel really good about that as a leader, and the added benefit is it builds a better organization. So I don't get what the downside is of all that.
No, I agree. I'm on the positive psychology side too. Of we can use it to do different things and to challenge ourselves in different ways and create new skills. And I think it's going to be an interesting time, but we just have to keep humans sort of in focus. So, well, John, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, David. I enjoyed it too.
Excellent. Well, listeners, if you haven't done so already, head on over to peoplemanagingpeople.com/subscribe. Get signed up for the newsletter. Create a free account on the website. You can check out our AI Transformation Explorer as well as all our other resources. One-touch sign up for events, all that. And until next time, stay on the positive psychology side of things.